colorful rain. Around the next bend, Mr. Bus Driver hit the brakes again. The yellow bus stopped a foot in front of Mr. Janitor, who was still sweeping the great hallway with his wide broom. He calmly pulled a spray bottle and a sponge from his overalls and began wiping bugs off the bus windshield. Mr. Janitor, Bradley called out. We need your help. What's up, Brad? The man asked. Where's the closest entrance to the mines? We must get to the boiler room under Chalk Mountain. I have a plan to get us all off this island. Mr. Janitor's scrub-brush mustache quivered. And I bet you're just clever enough to do that, Brad, he said. Follow me. Mr. Janitor led Bradley through thumbtack bushes to a door in the ground. He opened it with the silver key off his keyring and disappeared down the ladder. By lighting a match after match, he showed the way through the dark tunnels until the pair stood in a large chamber filled with pools of bubbling paint. Bradley studied the steaming valves, hissing faucets, and dripping pipes. We'll open everything up, he said. We'll let all the paint under Apple Island flow. But Brad, that will cause this entire mountain to blow its top, said Mr. Janitor. Exactly, said Bradley, and he began spinning wheels, yanking levers, and turning knobs as if we were in a video arcade. We're leaving this island, Mr. Janitor. We should be able to reach the blimp before things get really going. Mr. Janitor pulled a large wrench from his side pocket. Now I got you, he said, and began loosening every bolt in sight. Within seconds, the great tangle of pipes began to rattle. Seconds after, the floor, walls, and ceiling started to shake. A pencil-lead stalagmite toppled over and broke to pieces. An eraser stalactite snapped off the ceiling and bounced dangerously around the floor. From somewhere deep underneath the island came a low rumble. Time to peel out of here, said Mr. Janitor. This mountain is about to explode. Bradley followed Mr. Janitor's shaking match flame back down the tunnel. By the time the two were back on the bus, the ground was quaking violently. Red paint oozed from the summit of Chalk Mountain like a skinned knee. It flowed in bloody stripes down its sides. We must get to the blimp, Mr. Bus Driver, said Bradley. I sure hope it's still parked at the end of the road. No sooner had the bus began to roll than the mammoth mountain of chalk erupted. Out of the bus window, Bradley, Mr. Janitor, Prince Apple, Miss Secretary, Miss Library witnessed a great geyser of red paint gushing straight up from the mountaintop. Ah, said Prince Apple. It's a miracle, said Miss Secretary. There she blows, shouted Miss Library. How do you like them apples? Crab teachers, said Mr. Janitor. Reminds me of the time I squeezed the ketchup bottle too hard in our school cafeteria, said Bradley. As they watched the jet of red paint turn orange, orange turned yellow, and the yellow turned purple, shortly afterward colored rain began to fall. Heavy globs of paint, red, orange, yellow, and purple, splattered upon the ground and drummed upon the roof of the bus. Wow, said Bradley. Modern art. I sure am glad I don't have to clean up this mess, said Mr. Janitor. Mr. Bus Driver shifted gears. Hold on, everyone, he said. The ride could get rough. Bang, bang, slipping and sliding on the slick tiles. The bus rattled down the great hallway. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth. The tires spun and skidded to the left and right. But gripping the steering wheel hard, Mr. Bus Driver kept this bus on course. Through the driving rain, green, now blue, now violet, Bradley saw that they were passing the grand playground. Multicolored teachers slithered, wallowed, rolled, crawled, and did belly flops on the slippery asphalt. The entire surface had turned into one giant finger painting. The bus roared past Teacherville, now painted bright green, and the white and chocolate milk dairy, which had turned dark blue, and every apple tree in the woods dripped orange and yellow. At last, the bus reached mile zero on the great hallway. To Bradley's relief, Pedagogue 2 still sat on the soccer field, bobbing up and down under the splattering paint. Can you fly that blimp, Mr. Bus Driver? Bradley asked. If it has a motor, I can fly it, the man reminded him. 3 stout ropes tethered the blimp to the ground. During a lull in the rain, Mr. Janitor sliced through them with a sickle while Bradley called to his class, Come on, everyone, let's get off the bus. But no one moved. They ate crab apples, didn't they? Said Prince Apple. Ah, I think they'll respond only to a teacher's command. Bradley nodded, and in the deep, husky voice of authority that he had heard his teacher use hundreds of times, he said, "All right, students, form a straight line outside the bus." In unison, the class rose and marched off the bus. "Students, proceed on to the blimp," ordered Bradley. And his class stamped up the metal stairs. Miss Library, Miss Secretary, Prince Apple, Mr. Janitor, and Mr. Bus Driver quickly followed. With his class and the others now safe, Bradley had one last task to perform. He ran to the woods and found a stick. Heavy gray rain had just fallen, and in the paint that covered the soccer field, he wrote in giant letters, "Bradley was here." The instant Bradley leaped up the metal stairs, Mr. Bus Driver pulled a lever and the blimp rose off the ground. Soon it floated above the colorful rain. Bradley looked out the window to admire the sloppy scene he had created. Paint covered every corner of the peanut-shaped island as on an artist's palette, and still more paint spewed out of Chalk Mountain. Black, then white, then turquoise, then peach. "What a mess," said Bradley. He knew Operation Misteach would be canceled, and all the schools in the world were saved. What a glorious, glorious mess. The school day ends. As the blimp soared over the ocean, Bradley turned to his classmates. They sat silently in their seats, motionless, stuck in the crabapple trance. "Will they ever snap out of it?" he asked the adult passengers who sat behind him. "How will I explain this to their parents?" Miss Secretary looked at the rows of blank faces with sorrowful eyes, and Miss Library said, "Sorry, Bradley, I never read the health and medical books in the big book building." "Kids just aren't kids when they are that quiet and still," said Mr. Janitor, and Prince Apple shrugged his shoulders. All at once, a voice next to Bradley said, "Good blimp ride. Told you this field trip would be great, Bradley, didn't I? Mrs. Gross isn't a bad teacher, as you said, right?" Good old Duncan. Bradley's friend was bouncing in his seat, squashing his nose against the window and elbowing Bradley in the ribs. Bradley wanted to hug his pal, but he didn't. Instead, he returned a sharp elbow into his side. "So you don't remember, Dunk?" he said. "Remember what?" "Apple Island, the Chalk Mountain volcano, the crabby teachers." "Are you going on about that teacher stuff again?" said Duncan. "Teachers are teachers." So it was true. Duncan had no recollection of what had just happened. He thought this was all just a pleasant field trip, a short blimp ride. Little by little, the blimp filled with sounds of chattering, singing, giggling, bickering, and complaining. Little by little, Bradley's class was returning to normal. No one seemed to care or even notice that Mrs. Gross was gone or that 5 other adults had joined them. When the blimp landed at the airport, everyone piled out and boarded the yellow bus still parked across the runway. Mr. Bus Driver drove the bus down the highway while the class sang 100 bottles of beer on the wall, 100 bottles of beer, as if they had never stopped. Finally, the bus pulled onto the school grounds and parked in front of the beige L-shaped school building. Bradley turned to his Apple Island friends. "This is it. My school," he said. "And Prince Apple, by the front door is the principal's office. The secretary works in there too. Miss Secretary. Mr. Janitor, the man sweeping the sidewalk is our school janitor. And see that room on the corner, Miss Library? That's our library." Bring! School was out, and students came charging out the doors. Like parachuters out of a plane, Bradley's class leaped from the bus and scattered in all directions. Bradley followed the grown-ups off the bus and faced them again. "But where will you go?" he asked. "What will you do?" "Well, we've just been discussing that very thing," said Prince Apple. "Remember, Brad," said the janitor, "some crabby teachers have already come to this country, and one bad apple can spoil a whole school." "So I'll drive this bus to every school in the country," said Mr. Bus Driver. "We'll search for any teachers with purple ankles." "Maybe the boys and girls can help us," said Miss Secretary. "Anyone who is brave enough can check the color of their teacher's ankles, perhaps during story time." "And we'll also visit the library," said Miss Library. "I'm going to make sure the crabby teachers haven't put any of their Operation Misteach books in them yet." "Sounds great," said Bradley. "When do you leave?" "Sorry, Brad," said Mr. Janitor. You need to stay at your school and finish your education. We know you'll be doing more great things in the future. You're the apple of our eye. After hugs and hearty handshakes, the former castaways climbed back onto the bus. As it rolled away, Bradley turned toward his school. Well, so much for that school day, he said. Now there's only 4 days until this week is through. 27 weeks until the year's over, and 8 years until I graduate. And that's the story of Apple Island and where teachers come from. So, do you have crabby teachers at your school or not?